Pandemonium Reigns.
Pandemonium Reigns podcast. What is up? It's your boy Mike, flying solo here today, gearing up to talk about some of these Week 12 matchups while looking back at some Week 11 results, some of the games that we previewed this time last week. We thank you so much for tuning in. Go ahead, press like, share, subscribe, let your friends, let your family know about the Pandemonium Reigns podcast. And let's go ahead and dive right into it. Week 11, vintage college football weekend, if you ask me. Just some wild results. Again, going to use those to kind of look ahead towards the end of the season. I mean, it's coming into focus. The rankings are getting super tight. We're approaching rivalry week. We'll be previewing rivalry week in a 1 week's time because everyone's about to play their next to last game of the season for the most part. Probably some select exclusions to that across the country. But again, just want to talk about, again, what happened in week 11 while looking at what we've got on deck for week 12. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right, getting right into the games from week 11 that we're going to start off with. Utah at Washington. Washington pulling off a 7-point home win against the Utes. The season probably of what ifs if you're a Utah fan continues because just yet another, and this one a close loss to an absolute playoff contender, someone that's right in the hunt to be one of the last four teams standing with a Heisman candidate running their show, Michael Penix Jr. The Utes fall just a little bit short. They lead going into half by 4. They lead 28-24 before ultimately giving up 11 points in the third quarter and not adding to their lead or padding their lead or mounting a comeback effort ultimately in this game. It was back and forth. It was a pretty balanced game. There was certainly not a whole lot of domination from one side or the other. You did have Washington winning the total yardage battle by about 70 yards. They held the ball for ultimately 9 minutes longer in the game. All contributing factors. But again, I think so many what ifs for the Utes. You know, what if Cam Rising was healthy? What if you had depth that you might have seen at a college football program prior to the transfer portal express opening up and really thinning out rosters? Obviously, teams have used it to their advantage as well. You know, there are teams with legitimate depth. You look at, and this is such a weird example at this spot, but Texas A&M, what would they be? And they just fired their coach in a 49-point win, but what would they be if they didn't have Max Johnson on that squad? You look at Ole Miss and the way that they brought in quarterbacks ahead of this season, bringing in Spencer Sanders, bringing in the other LSU transfer, Max Johnson being one of those at Texas A&M, bringing in the other, I think it's Walker Howard, who's a Rebel, and we'll talk about the Rebels in just a minute. But again, what ifs if you had more quarterback depth, if you had just maybe more playmakers for the quarterbacks that have played at receiver or at tight end to kind of propel you through losing a guy, a veteran like Cam Rising, as hard as that can be to do. But again, not many teams that have that kind of depth. That's just kind of the sport as it is right now. Not terribly sold on the Huskies and how they've been playing after the Oregon win, as impressive as it was. I don't love their chances in, a potential rematch or just outright surviving kind of what they have left. They're going to travel to Oregon State. They're road 2.5-point underdogs at Oregon State, the 8-2 Beavers here in week 12. Probably not something I'm going to have a chance to dedicate a lot of my Saturday to. I do hope to be able to see parts of that game, if not, most of it. But Washington, you're looking right out of birth if you can just handle business a little bit longer, if you can just spread your resources out long enough to carry you there. You've certainly got such a weapon in Penix Jr. that I think anything can happen. That's the beautiful benefit in college football of having a star-studded quarterback like that, star receivers like they have. Again, wish I had just a totally free Saturday and I could watch that game because Oregon State, not a bad squad, 8-2. Really love what they've got going on there. Getting a lot of good out of DJ Uyunglele, the best of him for sure. And Utah, now they're going to travel to Arizona in a battle of 7-3 teams. If you, again, I'm just going to ask for the receipts. If you had Arizona at 7-3 through 10 games, I just need to see the receipts on that. I believe, I'm about to confirm here, I believe Utah is a 1 point road favorite at Arizona. Arizona a 1 point home favorite. So, being the home team, Vegas doesn't really know what to do with it. Clearly, if it was a neutral site game, that's telling me that Utah would be favored, or certainly if it was a home game for them, wouldn't mind. It's right there, smack dab in the middle of the day at 2:30 Eastern. If I had a chance to watch some of that one as well, it's probably not going to fall in line as the real life calendar gets busier and busier this time of year. But yeah, I just think what is for the Utes. Washington, they've got to continue to outlast teams if they have to, win in whatever form and fashion that they can, because I certainly don't like their chances of getting in as a one-loss team. All the chaos that can happen everywhere else across the sport would really, really hurt them. I think if they ended the regular season and conference championship season as a one-loss team, I think they have to they really need to be an undefeated team once the dust settles for their berth. Even though they've got a pretty impressive resume, I just don't like their chances when you look at maybe Alabama wins the SEC, maybe a one-loss Big Ten champion. Not looking like it's going to be that way, but again, it could be. You just never know. All the chaos that we just have come to expect and know. You better get it to the finish line undefeated, I think, if you're Washington. Alrighty, next game on the precap. Looking back at Week 11 and then previewing what is to come in Week 12 is the Miami Hurricanes at the Florida State Seminoles in Week 11, where you had typical Miami tied at the half with these undefeated, all signs indicating that they're a playoff team. Seminoles, they've got a little work left to do, obviously, as every team that makes it will do, obviously. But they're tied at the half with these Seminoles that have been playing better than them on the whole. They are undefeated. They are star-studded at the skill positions and in really select other positions across the field. They look like a juggernaut this year. Didn't matter because Miami, again, tied at half before ultimately losing the second half 17-10 and losing this game by a touchdown. I know Keon Coleman didn't really lead the way statistically for the Noles in this game, but that touchdown that he had on the jump ball from Jordan Travis had a huge punt return to kind of set things up as well in this game. The thing that I don't like for Florida State in this is that Miami was, as a team, because you had it split up between Emory Williams and Tyler Van Dyke, Miami 10 for 30 as a team passing in this game. Now, they managed 204 yards on 10 completions with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception on, again, 10 for 30. You had 20 incompletions and 10 completions on 30 attempts. That's hideous. And you gave up a ton of yards for that low amount of completions that you gave up. Don't love that. That means you were really getting, to me, killed on the big play. Miami had Jacoby George go off for 5 receptions, 153 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I don't love that. The reason I don't love that is because, imagine that this was the conference championship game. You've got, and obviously Miami, the Hurricanes are not a conference championship caliber opponent through 10 games. That's clear. But let's just say, you're facing Georgia. You're facing Washington and the way that they spread the ball around. Let's say that LSU was clean. They didn't have the losses and the poor defense that they have, and they're in the playoffs, and you're about to face Jaden Daniels, who, my God, we'll get to in a minute, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, or Lad McConkey, Brock Bowers, you name it. You're facing that opponent. You gave up 204 yards and 2 touchdowns on 10 completions. I love that you forced 20 incompletions. I absolutely cannot believe, and I'm in disbelief that you gave up the amount of explosion on 10 completions. I don't like that. I don't think that bodes well for you. I mean, it could bode poorly for you against the Gators, as limited as they've been, as bad as they've been in moments. Their defense is also very suspect. So, I mean, you should be able to give it right back to them if they make it a shootout. But just things I don't like. I mean, a pretty balanced attack from Florida State. Now, they only managed 57 team rushing yards because Miami clearly sacked the mess out of Jordan Travis, and he because of the way statistics are tallied in college football, he ends the game with negative 30 rush yards. That's not ideal, but you did have Trey Benson go 16 for 80, managing 5 yards per carry on his way of doing that, and 2 touchdowns, 2 huge touchdowns, obviously. Jordan Travis just kind of doing more of what he does, 19 of 31, 265, a touchdown, no picks. Good job taking care of the ball there. It was Johnny Wilson and Jakad Douglas who did the heavy lifting again as receiving targets. But again, my God, Keon Coleman, what an addition he's been. I don't think this team is near the position they're at with just literally one guy in Keon Coleman and the explosion that he's had in Tallahassee. Love to see it in the sport. These two teams couldn't really be on more different paths in Week 12, both in the win-loss column, in the opponents that they play now. You'll have Miami hoping to avoid their 5th loss of the year, as they're again now sitting at 6-4 on the year. They are a 1-point home favorite against the 9-1 Louisville Cardinals. You couldn't give me the money. If you gave me the money to bet on Miami at home against Louisville, I'd just pocket it. There's no way. There's no way I'm betting Miami to win the game against Louisville, 9-1 Louisville, because again of the home field disadvantage that they kind of play under, the poor showings that they get, the poor results that they give. Cristobal and his ridiculously terrible ACC home record. There's just no way. And Florida State's going to cruise to win number 11 over North Alabama. Yay. Can't wait to see that matchup. Before, again, ultimately go into the swamp, the Gators will look to derail the Seminoles in their playoff and national championship aspirations. I say good luck to them doing that because of the season that they've had. The Gators sitting at 5-5 currently. Just, again, I'd be shocked, but it is, again, a sport full where you get these shocking results, you get these crazy outcomes, and you get coaches fired and paid $77 million to go away and not do their job anymore. Sign me up for that. It is the sport that we love. But again, Seminoles 27, Hurricanes 20. FSU, again, just looking to keep it rolling and to cruise into the playoffs. Next on the docket, looking again in the rearview mirror, you had the Alabama Crimson Tide murder the Kentucky Wildcats in Lexington at Kroger Field, 49-21 beatdown on the road. Just wow, what a turnaround from Alabama, from Jalen Milroe, from the GOAT, Nick Saban. I'm sorry, he still is the GOAT. They clinched the SEC West in this 28-point drubbing of Milroe. I'm looking at my notes. You can probably tell that. Of Kentucky, they murdered Kentucky while Milroe tallied 6 touchdowns on the day. Kentucky, I just don't know what to make of you. You're 6-4. You're wasting loads and loads of talent. This will segue really, really nicely into the next game and the next 2 teams that I look at, and you'll understand why when we get there. But you're wasting Devin Leary, who was, we keep talking about it, one of the, top 3, at worst top 5 transfer quarterback additions in the 2023 season. A guy who I've said countless times I would have taken at Tennessee to either battle with Joe Milton or to beat him out or to, whatever. Just you name it. I would have taken Devin Leary in a heartbeat. I would probably still take Dane Key and Barryon Brown on my teams, even though there's a reason those guys did end up at Kentucky in some cases. Whether it's behavior, whether it's attitude, you name it. Just wasting loads and loads of talent. I didn't, I wish I would have been on my game when I talked about this and made an outlandish statement about Ray Davis like I did when the Wildcats traveled to Athens. But I didn't make that statement because the reason I say that is Ray Davis, 26 rushing yards on 12 attempts. Of course, he manages 2 touchdowns. He has 2 of Kentucky's 3 touchdowns on the ground in a 26-yard output. Just what a waste of talent. I mean, you crushed the portal alone at the quarterback and running back position. Dre Davis is proven he's a fantastic player with loads of ability. His team is not good enough a lot of times for him to really showcase that against these opponents like Georgia, like Alabama. And look, he had receiving yards to go along with his 59 or 60 on the money, whatever he had in Athens. But just what a absolute waste of talent for Kentucky. They again 6-4, traveling to 4-6 South Carolina in the sadness. Again, the waste of talent bowl in Week 12, if you will, between the Wildcats and the Gamecocks. South Carolina wasting their fair share of talent while also dealing with a lot more injuries than most. They've had Leggett down at times. They've had Juice Wells down a lot of other times. We've heard Shane Beamer talk about their issues, their health along the offensive line, the condition that they were in when they were gearing up for the season in camp. You've heard it. You've got Alabama, who I'm not done talking about yet, with the tune-up leading up to the Iron Bowl against the hometown squad for your boy, the UTC Moccasins. They're going to get anything else they need to get ironed out before the Iron Bowl. Not that it'll be the challenge that it is in some years, but it's still such a heated, bitter rivalry that it will, I'm sure, be a great game. But Alabama looking to iron those things out against the UTC Mocs. Alabama, though, what a job, Nick Saban. I can't believe, in thinking back to some of the early season wins, definitely the early season loss to Texas when they looked like they were on life support during times of that game, during early stretches of the season. And he's, again, got them one loss, 9-1 on the year. Outside looking into the playoff, I mean, there are certainly scenarios where Alabama gets into this last version of the 14 playoff. What a turnaround for Milroe. Think about it. He's a sophomore. He's going to be potentially – think about how long it's been since Alabama's had a 4-year quarterback and what it could look like if you add 2 more years to Jalen Milroe's college career. Now, they're all at the same time, it's not like he's guaranteed the job. You know, they've got guys coming in. They've got young guys on the roster. He could obviously lose his job. Think about Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa and the back and forth that it was there from the conference championship game to the national championship games for a couple of years there. Think about the back and forth of that. That could obviously happen again. I'm not saying it can't. But Milroe has greatly improved. He's such a weapon with his legs. He didn't crush Kentucky in the way that he crushed LSU on the ground. He only had 36 yards on the ground. But again, that factors in sacks. He had 3 touchdowns on 8 attempts for 36 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's simply phenomenal is what that is. Love what they're getting out of him. Just wish it was for anyone else but Nick Saban in Alabama. Also want to just revisit something real quick because we've not seen a ton of garbage time play for quarterbacks at Alabama this year, just kind of due to the makeup of their team, the way their games have gone. And it's Ty Simpson in this game at Kentucky who gets in late, 1 of 3 for 51 yards passing. Kind of hilarious that he hits a bomb. No touchdowns, no picks, but kind of hilarious that he hits a bomb on his lone completion. Tyler Buckner, what were you thinking going into this situation? Talk about another guy that's going to have eligibility left, who would be, to me, a crazy person, a crazy man, a lunatic to stay in Tuscaloosa if he does have eligibility left. I know that your OC for Notre Dame is the OC for the Crimson Tide. Also, real quick, what a turnaround for that guy. What an improvement he's had as the season's progressed. He's using his guys better. They're still not the murder ball, that we all heard rumors about, that we all heard that they talked about wanting to get back to. They're not that, but they are impressive. I mean, I can't believe that they've got 1 loss and it's still just Texas based on what I saw early in the season. But again, Tyler Buckner, what were you doing? What were you thinking? Might be time to look into a new landing spot because, again, you're not even getting the garbage time snaps at this point, and you were expected to compete for the job, to possibly take it away from Jalen Milroe, and that clearly didn't happen. If you'll remember, a moment ago, I spoke of Kentucky, their waste of talent, the segue that is for the next game, and that is Michigan 24, Penn State 15. Doing it without their head coach, They did it while passing. Here's Michigan's pass numbers: 7 of 8, 60 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. One attempt, I think, on in the second half of the game that I think didn't count because of a penalty. Maximum one attempt passing second half. Penn State still gives up 24 points. They only manage 15 of their own. What an ugly loss. To me, I question what's happening with the talent once it gets to Happy Valley. Never been the biggest fan of James Franklin. I mean, it's hard to disagree with some of his work, the Vanderbilt work, kind of keeping things rolling a little bit at Penn State. Some of the guys that he's put in the league have been remarkable and have crushed it in the NFL, which brings me back to what they did in college, which I don't love. Results like this one, I think the number is 4 wins versus Michigan and Ohio State since his arrival at Penn State. That is not getting it done. That makes me want to call you Big Game James, not James Worthy, not the way that he had the clutch gene. You're Big Game James Franklin, and you don't really show up in them, or your team doesn't, or they ultimately find ways to lose the game. I can't believe that Michigan won a 9-point game on the road in 2023. Team struggling on the road without their head coach, without throwing the ball in the second half or needing to throw the ball in the second half. And it's not like they won by 40. That'd be one thing if they just ran it because they were up by 40 at half. No, they ran it and they kept Penn State at bay. That's impressive on their defense. That's impressive on their trenches on both sides to me. And that's game control. Also want to say that I think Sharon Moore is a future head coach. That, I'm not breaking any news there. I think that's obvious. His post-game reaction was solid gold to me. I could just watch that. I could bottle that up, put it on replay, and I would watch it. The emotion, I loved. The language was hilarious to me. I'm sorry. Don't sue me for that. But again, they get the job done in Happy Valley. I talked about when I previewed this game, Penn State probably not loving the fact that it was a nooner, or ultimately that it wasn't a whiteout night game in that environment that we get oftentimes in Happy Valley. Michigan on the ground. We've talked about what they did through the air. On the ground as a team, 46 attempts, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns. Blake Corum doing the heavy lifting as he often has the last couple of years. 26 attempts, 145 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Listen to this. His 26 attempts, that's 16 more than Donovan Edwards, and he still managed 5.6 per carry. Now, he did have a long of 44 yards mixed in there, so he had about 25 other carries for 100 yards. I don't care. Look at the condition he was in, bruised up, bleeding after the game. Donovan Edwards still doing 10 for 52 and a touchdown. J.J. McCarthy doing his thing with 8 and 34, I think it is, on the ground. That's totally J.J.'s game. He can do so much with his legs and moving the ball around through the air. Penn State, you had two guys outrush Nicholas Singleton. That's your quarterback, Drew Aller, and your other running back, Ketron Allen. Interesting there to me. Penn State, we talked about what Michigan did through the air. Penn State, not a lot different. 10 for 22 for 70 yards. 1 touchdown, no pick. Obviously, not the completion percentage that Michigan had when they did pass the ball. You only managed 10 more yards on 3 more completions and 14 more attempts. Don't love any of that. Here's the other thing. It's Michigan wins the yardage battle by 49 yards. They win the time of possession battle. Again, think about the rushing numbers and what they didn't do through the air. They win the time of possession battle by 6.5 minutes. Just what a bonkers game and result that was. Can't get over it. Penn State, they're still looking at they're still sitting, at 8-2, heading into Week 12 against 6-4 Rutgers. They are 20.5-point home favorites. That's a big number, I think, when you talk about the letdown of this game, the letdown of the Ohio State game. Rutgers being a little bit improved, and Schiano doing some of the old Schiano things at Rutgers. It's a little bit weird of a large number. You've got Michigan who listen, we all know that the game is coming in Week 13 in rivalry week. You better watch your back. You better handle your business at Maryland. 19-point road favorites at Maryland. I know that Maryland's not a world beater. I just can't get over the fact that, you can't overlook them, especially without your head coach. All the drama in the world. I still want the documentary out. I still want the movie, the Hollywood movie with, just star-stud that thing and give me the story of Connor Stallions in Michigan. But again, 19-point road favorites at Maryland. You better not slip up. Boy, you would really waste an opportunity that you've got down the line if you do before rivalry week 13 and the game. But Wolverines get the win 24-15 at Happy Valley. Good riddance, James Franklin. All right. Got one more major game from week 11 that I want to, again, look back at and then preview for both these teams what's coming down the line. Before I do that, I want to tell you about our wonderful sponsor, North Forsyth Training and Fitness, located at 4015 Browns Bridge Road. If you're in the Cumming area and you're looking to change your life physically or looking for a new gym, NFTF is the place for you. Jesse Foster, owner and head coach, has got all the credentials and experience that you would need to reach your goals. He's got morning classes that run 5:30, 7:30, and 9. Afternoon classes 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, and 6:30. Surely there's a time for you to schedule a class and get over to NFTF. It's a community-driven gym. Not only you achieving your goals, you're doing so with a group of people that you will call your community and your friends. If you're interested in NFTF, contact Jesse Foster today. See what it's all about. You can contact him at 706-633-6609. You also got to let him know that the boys at Pandemonium Reigns podcast sent you to him. All right, one more major look back. Like I said, Ole Miss getting absolutely splattered by Georgia, 52-17. This game, y'all, was tied 14 apiece with 14 roughly minutes left in the second quarter, much like the Florida-Georgia game, with just a minor differences here. The score is then 45-17 before Ole Miss manages 3 more points. And that came 2 full quarters later, 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter before Ole Miss scored their final 3 points of the game. The game ends up 52-17. Georgia gets in everybody and their mama that they would want to get into this game, getting Brock Vandergriff in the game, getting, all the running backs in the game, all the receivers and all the backups, the 4- and 5-star backups. I think I saw a 6-star backup get into this game. Georgia just doing what they do, what they've done. Reminds me again so much of the Florida game, except Ole Miss is a much, much better team in 2023 than the Florida Gators, which is weird. But it's true. They are better. They're well coached. They probably have similar talent, if not better. Certainly Quinshon Judkins is a stud. We've seen Jackson Dart play some good ball. He had a kind of average day, 10 of 17, 112, no touchdowns, 1 pick. Judkins, speaking of him, 22 attempts, 75 yards. That's only good for 3.4 per carry. He did get 2 touchdowns on those 22 carries. And he also had 14 more on the ground. But again, just Georgia doing what they do. Here's the terrifying and scary thing for any opponent, anyone that doesn't like Georgia, anyone that thinks, hey, we might match up with Georgia in the playoff. We might see them down the line. Here's the thing. They don't have the defense that they have. We've all talked about that. We've all recognized that. In the interior, you're going to get a little more push here and there. On the outside, don't throw it at Lassiter, but you can find some yards here and there. Again, Ole Miss only doing enough to find 17 points on the road. Let's call that at least, managing 17 points on the road in Athens. Here's what Georgia has not done before now. This year, not this week, but this year. Beck had, Georgia passing 311. 306 of those were from Beck. 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. On the ground, 35 attempts, 300 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Y'all, 8.6 yards per carry. 35 attempts, 300 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's new. And again, it's not like they haven't been capable of doing that. That's just not what we've seen them do. That's elite balance in the. Tell me that. All right, a team goes for 600 yards as Georgia did. How often is it 1,000,000 yards passing or rushing, and then you did an average amount of the other? 311 to 300 in the yardage category to get you to 611. That is outstanding. That's different than what they've been doing. Again, you can't convince me that it's not. And I'm not even bashing Stetson Bennett or any, Jake Fromm. I'm not bashing those guys. I'm not bashing previous coordinators, as opposed to what Bobo's doing now. I'm just saying they are clicking on all cylinders at the absolute perfect time for their three-peat aspirations. Ole Miss is looking at a tune-up, really a couple of tune-ups, and look, I'm not adding, continuing to bash Mississippi State while they're down. What a tough situation for Arnett to walk into. It's hard to believe that he finds himself without a job and he'll land back on his feet as a coordinator in no time. Maybe even another head coach opportunity down the line. I mean, it was a tough spot. It always was going to be. But Mississippi, Ole Miss, that is, with a tune-up against 2-8 UL Monroe on Saturday at noon before, again, traveling to the Bulldogs of Mississippi State. Georgia, and we'll spend a little bit more time here because that we're your boys, that we love our balls, but we ain't going to spend much time. Georgia, traveling to Knoxville, 10-point road favorites. You could put that number at 20 right now, and I'd probably bet Georgia if I was someone that bet on my team, being the Vols. If I was someone that still did a lot of sports betting, I'd bet Georgia to cover 3 touchdowns with no thought about it. Georgia obviously will close it out with the Yellow Jackets in Atlanta in rivalry week, week 13. They've already clinched their path, as has Alabama, for yet another Saban and Smart conference championship game, a championship game variety between these two. And again, such a chance, for there's a rematch chance in there if Alabama wins in Atlanta, you name it. But again, going to spend this time, the Vols, they don't even get an orange cast after that god-awful showing in Columbia, Missouri. You're just going to get some brief thoughts. Dan and I talked about not orange casting this game when we recapped the beatdown by the Missouri Tigers. What could Tennessee do? What could they do? Pray? I mean, they're not going to run the ball well enough exclusively without everything clicking to beat Georgia. When they're not getting stops against Missouri, they didn't get stops against Florida, they didn't get stops against Alabama, and again, talking about enough stops to win the games. How are they going to get stops against a team that just put 6-11 on Ole Miss at home? I mean, how are they going to find the stops? You got Brock Bowers. What a warrior. He's already back from his tightrope procedure. That blows my mind. Who's going to match up on him? Elijah Herring? Aaron Beasley? I'm not bashing anyone. I'm just saying he's the best. He's right there among the best players that we've got in the nation this year. I don't see a path here, and it kills me to be not even doing a full episode on this game. But sorry, we just I don't see the point in it. I can't get myself excited enough to talk about this game for much longer than I have right now. I don't see, again, I've talked about it, a path for victory. Milton would have to be Superman. Receivers are injured. What kind of condition is, even someone that's not out for the years, like Squirrel White, we saw him get banged up in the game at times. What's his condition like? You talk about, you'd have to have young receivers like a Nimrod or a Webb winning battles on the outside against, again, just a really, really good Georgia defense. I am going to predict this game. I've not given any predictions for any of these other games that we've looked ahead to in this kind of weird mixed episode, which hope you're enjoying. Just kind of bear with us because life has come at your boys here lately. You've got models out there, guys that run the models where it's like a 3 or a 6 point Georgia win. That ain't me. There's not a model in the world that I would trust saying that. I'm going to say Georgia wins this one fairly easy. I'm going to go 42-13 Dogs. That's kind of been the range of scoring in this game outside of 2022 when it was, 27-13, 26-13. Not as close as the scoreboard reflected in 2022 in Athens. Tennessee's got some things to figure out. There couldn't be a more perfect opponent to not figure things out against. This is the worst time for a matchup like this one. Kind of is what it is. but I think it's going to be humbling. I think it's going to show the recruits that are in attendance, because there's a good list of visitors for Tennessee, that they are needed. Hopefully will be the message received that the environment can be great, has been great during the Heupel era, and hopefully Georgia will at least have to win over a rowdy crowd. I hope that the juice is in the stadium in there. Wouldn't mind being there, but not paying the price to get in the door again after a showing like we got in Columbia, Missouri. Wrapping the puppy up, I wanted to mention real quick, kind of in the same format as today's episode, just some of the other losers from Week 11 heading into Week 12. You've got Kansas. Kansas was playing 4-5 Texas Tech at home in Lawrence, and they managed to lose that game by 3 in a low-scoring battle. And again, we've talked about the improvement that Texas Tech has shown at times, but that's not been them this year. Obviously, with winning their 5th game in Week 11, that's not improvement. That is a down year. So Kansas falls to 7-3, and they are now treated with playing the Kansas State Wildcats at home, where they are 7.5-point home underdogs. Don't love that one. Wouldn't touch that if I was betting. Yet again, I'm not. But again, Kansas State and Kansas this week. Just again, one of the other losers in addition to the Vols from Week 11. Oklahoma State had to really be the ultimate loser from Week 11. That 45-3 beatdown and thrashing in Central Florida at Central Florida. Also handed the Knots their 5th win on the year. That's pretty terrible. You know, UCF was 4-5 coming into that game and beat a pretty good, what we thought was a pretty decent or a pretty at least above average Oklahoma State squad. They beat them 45-3 on their home turf, which is again impressive by UCF. Terrible by Okie Lot. Okie Lot does get it pretty easy on the way out the door for their season. They'll travel to Houston this week. Then they'll host BYU in Week 13. And this is really the last thing I want to talk about in wrapping this episode up. The Heisman race, the most outstanding player in the nation race. If you've heard us give our thoughts on the award and how shameful it's handled most years, the reason I talk about this is what Jaden Daniels did at home against the Florida Gators. 372 yards through the air for 3 touchdowns. No picks, I believe, despite the massive amount of yards that he puts up. 234 more rush yards. How many he have against Alabama? 1 million. He adds 234 more against Florida and 2 touchdowns. You might be thinking that he added that 234 on about 25 attempts. 12 attempts. 12 attempts, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns. If LSU was 1 loss, if they were in playoff contention, or if they were undefeated, certainly there wouldn't be a Heisman discussion. It would be handed right now to Jaden Daniels, because the dude is outstanding. And he's, again, playing just so much better than I ever imagined that he could have against SEC competition, even in a year like 2023 when Florida's not Florida of old. You've obviously got Michael Penix. You've got Bo Nix. You've got Marvin Harrison still getting some talk. But again, you can't convince me it wouldn't be Jaden Daniels if, in 2 scenarios, if the award was truly given to the most outstanding player, or if LSU, met the criteria of the award and he was the best player on a good team, on a better team, because they've only got 3 losses, but they're certainly no contender, whereas Washington and Oregon are. And Brock Bowers would also certainly be involved in this conversation if it wasn't for the few weeks of injury. But again, major props to that guy on getting back to health and getting back for what should certainly be his last year of college football. That will do it for, again, Week 12 preview, Week 11 recapping, if you will. Thank you for hanging in there with me. Thank you for checking out the show. I hope you absolutely have a fantastic Saturday of watching the sport that we love. God bless, and GBO.